is a basic necessity of life. Some people take it for granted. Others can't get enough food no matter how hard they try. Or in some cases, simply can't get a high enough quality of food. It's been that way since the dawn of time, and in the 2020s, it remains a problem. In today's video, social issue essay, Food Insecurity, we're going to trace the roots of food insecurity, how those living with it are affected beyond the obvious, and how we can relieve this problem, even if only to the slightest extent. I make many video essays about social justice issues, history, and politics here at the Autistic Advocate. To see them, you're going to have to go to my channel page and check out my series and playlists. But don't do that just yet. First, let's do what you came here to do, which was learn about the issue of food insecurity. First and foremost, what is food insecurity? I'm going to preface this video essay by differentiating between the terms hunger and food insecurity, since this video is about the latter. Food insecurity is defined as a situation in which a household cannot afford to provide adequate food for all of its members. Food insecurity involves having one or more of the following conditions: worrying about running out of food, worrying that food will not last, lack of a balanced diet, adults cutting out portion sizes or out meals entirely, eating less than what they felt they should, being hungry and not eating, unintended weight loss, or going entire days without eating for financial reasons. Simply put, hunger is the individual condition that results from these things. Food insecurity is the financial situation that leads to them. So what puts people at the greatest risk for food insecurity? Above all else, food insecurity is caused by poverty, but it's not as simple as one might think. People living in poverty, in this day and age, have their access to food blocked even further by a combination of factors such as housing insecurity, environmental injustice, unemployment, systemic racism, and inequitable policies. Based on her research on poverty, Pennsylvania State University economic geographer Amy Glassmeyer claims that when individuals live at, slightly above, or below the poverty line, unexpected expenses contribute to individuals reducing their food intake. Medical emergencies have a significant impact on poor families due to hospital bills, cost of medications, and co-pays for follow-up appointments. Employment security is also a contributor. People who live in areas with higher unemployment and underemployment rates and who have a minimal or very low amount of liquid assets are shown to be more likely to experience hunger or food insecurity. The complex interactions between a person's job status, income and benefits, and the number of dependents they must provide for influence the impact of hunger on a family. For example, food insecurity often increases with the number of additional children in the household due to the negative impact on wage labor hours and an increase in the household's overall food needs. Living in a food desert makes it difficult to get any food at all, and almost impossible to get highly nutritious food. A food desert is a town or city, rural or urban, to which the nearest grocery store or supermarket is at least 20 miles away. This means that people who live in these areas have to drive far away to get healthy food or subsist on the fast food convenience store food available closer to home. By making drives out to grocery stores, families living in food deserts spend more money on gas, and also the food there is more expensive and doesn't last as long. Processed corner store food is cheaper and has a longer shelf life, which helps a family that can only afford so much food in one pay period. But these foods can lead to health problems such as obesity, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. Social factors also play a part in food insecurity. There's widespread social stigma around the kind of help that is available, such as food stamps and food pantries, and this holds many low-income families back from obtaining their benefits even when they qualify for them. Food insecurity is no rare experience for college students who are short on cash from tuition payments, work low-paying jobs, and live on their own for the first time. Food insecurity prevalence was found to be 43.5% in a systematic review of food insecurity among U.S. students in higher education, twice the rate of food insecurity in American households. Elderly and disabled people are also vulnerable to food insecurity, especially because of their limited mobility and capacity for work. They're less likely to own a car and drive, and when they live in communities that lack public transportation, it can be quite challenging to access adequate food. Senior citizens are at an increased risk of food insecurity, with many having fixed incomes and often having to choose between health care and food. Food insecurity is also very racialized in the United States. To put this in perspective, the 10 U.S. counties with the highest food insecurity rates in the nation are at least 60% African American. 7 of these counties are in Mississippi, a state with a very high black population. In the United States, Hispanic and Latino families experience nearly twice the rate of food insecurity as non-Hispanic and Latino white families, and research shows higher risk of food insecurity in immigrant families and children of non-citizen. Racial prejudice and language, education, and cultural barriers create inequities that make Latinx communities more vulnerable to food insecurity. The most overlooked racial demographic of all is Native American. While research into Native American food security has gone unnoticed and under-researched until recent years, more studies are being conducted which reveal that Native Americans experience higher rates of food insecurity than any other race in the United States. The studies do not focus on the overall picture of Native American households, however, and tend to focus rather on smaller sample sizes in the available research. There are many reasons that contribute to the issue, but overall, the biggest lie in food costs on and near reservations, lack of access to well-paying jobs, and predisposition to health issues relating to obesity and/or mental health. So what happens when people have so much trouble accessing good quality food? When I say consequences of food insecurity, you probably think of eventually starving to death. That definitely can and does happen, but the problems food insecurity leads to go far beyond that. Even if you're not quite dying of starvation, the early signs of not having enough to eat are scary enough. I'm sorry to get graphic, but signs of having gone too long without eating include swelling, dizziness, dry and cracked skin, along with feelings of coldness, thinning of the face, pale, flaky skin, low blood pressure, low pulse, low body temperature, and cold extremities. Food banks and pantries help alleviate food insecurity and keep the stuff I just mentioned from happening, as I'll talk more about in the next section. But they have some, shall I say, side effects. For many reasons, food banks and pantries mostly provide foods that are high in processed sugars and salts and low in vitamin and mineral content, which leads to increased rates of diabetes and obesity for clients. Unfortunately, food banks and pantries can't do much about this because high fructose corn syrup, the primary ingredients in these foods, makes them cheaper and last longer, and that's what's within the range of resource for these nonprofits. This, in turn, leads to higher healthcare costs, both for the food insecure themselves and for the government and taxpayers. But we really shouldn't judge and shame the food insecure for not eating healthy enough and bringing chronic health problems upon themselves. Because trust me, they would give anything to have any other alternative. As if food insecurity weren't tough enough on adults, it inevitably has profound, lasting effects on children who grow up in food insecure households. Women who can't get enough to eat during pregnancy often give birth to their babies prematurely and at low birth weight and with often having birth defects. Children experiencing hunger in the first 3 years of life are more likely to be hospitalized, experience higher rates of anemia and asthma, and develop a weakened immune system and have chronic illnesses in adulthood. Later childhood food insecurity can cause a delayed onset of puberty, changing the rate of secretion of crucial hormones. After physical health, the realm in which food insecure children are next most affected is their education. I mean, think about it. If a kid doesn't eat breakfast before they go to school, empty stomachs and low blood sugar hinder their ability to focus and absorb the information, especially in the fields of math and reading. No wonder kids who regularly miss breakfast have 17.5% lower scores on standardized math tests than their classmates who regularly get nutritious breakfasts. Not to mention, these kids are more likely to repeat a grade in elementary school and experience developmental impairments in areas like language and motor skills. So what can be done about food insecurity? One of the most prominent ways in which the U.S. government addresses food insecurity is through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as the Food Stamp Program. Through this program, a debit card is given to families whose incomes are within 130% of the federal poverty line, with a grocery budget that refills on the first of every month. When this program first started out, the money came in the form of actual stamps that were mailed at the beginning of every month, hence why they were called food stamps. Despite the tremendous relief this safety net provides food insecure families, it doesn't even come close to being a cure-all. SNAP benefits refill on the first of the month and tend to run out before the end of the month. This means the family has to figure out another way to put food on the table in the meantime. Even while the benefits last, they're only enough to provide $1.40 in food per meal per person, which doesn't go very far. With every food insecure person and family having a different story, it's only appropriate that the public sector implement a variety of programs to reach as many of them as possible. National school lunch and school breakfast programs, in which schools provide free meals for students from low-income families, helps a lot with the situation I mentioned earlier, where kids can't focus or learn because they don't always get breakfast or lunch. However, students who receive free meals from their schools are often bullied for this indicator of low socioeconomic status, and sometimes even choose to go hungry and skip these meals rather than risk being stigmatized by their wealthier peers. Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC, is a special type of food stamps given to pregnant and breastfeeding women. To qualify for WIC, you must be a woman who is either pregnant, has an infant under the age of 1, or a child under the age of 5. With WIC, you get free purchases of the kinds of foods a pregnant or breastfeeding woman and her baby need, such as baby formula, juice, milk, breakfast cereal, cheese, eggs, rice, fruits, and vegetables. Unlike SNAP, which covers any food item in the entire store, WIC only covers the listed items and only specific brands at that. This itself varies from state to state. These programs geared towards specific situations of food insecurity are run and funded by the government, but the private sector can do these things too. In fact, someone would argue that an issue such as food insecurity is better addressed by the private sector. The most notable example of this is a food bank or food pantry. I know I said earlier that they have the problematic side effect of contributing to the high rates of obesity and diabetes among the low-income population due to their inability to provide quality, highly nutritious food. But this doesn't mean that food pantries shouldn't exist or that they don't do anything positive or important. Food pantries give each client a grocery package according to a variety of factors such as the size of their family, how long they need help getting through to the next paycheck, and specific dietary needs. There are also soup kitchens, which serve hot meals on a schedule. Despite their name, soup kitchens serve many different kinds of foods at each meal. This is especially helpful for people who are homeless and don't have any refrigeration or cooking equipment. But unlike food pantries, which make a strong effort to provide enough food to get a household through to the next paycheck or food stamp refill, soup kitchens generally only get you as far as a few meals. These things are great for treating the symptoms of food insecurity, but what's even better is initiatives to address the issues that block the food insecure's access to quality food in the first place. The ideal one would be to help minimum wage workers make higher incomes, both by requiring that they be paid a higher wage and by making the opportunity to get a higher ed degree needed to obtain a higher paying job more accessible. But until the day these things become realities, here are some other things we can do. Remember what I said earlier about food deserts? Well, one step local and state governments can take is to call for the building of more fresh produce grocery stores and supermarkets in these areas. A notable recent example of this is the New York City Fresh, that is, Food Retail Expansion to Support Health program, which promotes the construction of supermarkets in low-income neighborhoods by offering a reduction in land or building taxes for a certain period of time and providing grants, loans, and tax exemption for infrastructure costs. Perhaps the biggest barrier to this kind of solution is the oligopolistic nature of supermarkets. That is, a nature in which a few large supermarket chains maintain the large majority of market share and exercise considerable influence over retail locations and prices. An area that's a little easier to target is lack of transportation to supermarkets that's so common in low-income neighborhoods. So many of these people don't have cars or are on a super tight gas budget, so providing a bus for them to take to a store that sells high-quality food would be a huge help in improving their diets. This may fall short in that low-income people still may not have time to commute to these stores if they work 2 jobs and have large families to take care of, but it would still be a step in the right direction. One that I personally really like is community gardens set up in low-income neighborhoods. Not only does it help low-income people gain access to nutritious produce so close to where they live, but helps them gain a sense of community and accomplishment by having neighbors work together on a major project of which they then get to reap the benefits. Poverty is an issue with so many different facets to it, and everyone going through it has a different story. Being hungry sometimes and not always knowing where your next meal is going to come from is only the beginning. Just wait until your wealthier counterparts take over your neighborhood and everything becomes more and more expensive until you're basically run out of your home. Because that's what my next video is about, and you can see it once I put it up and set the link on your screen. In the meantime, you can also learn about either another social issue or another aspect of poverty, depending on my next recent post showing up on your screen.